it just all falls apart. All right, we're good. Let's see here. All righty. All righty, Adam, I think that we are officially live, my friend. We are on, Adam. Thank you so much for joining me today and being a part to share the story with the community of Highclere Castle, just in general, right? You know, like Highclere Castle Gin, Highclere Castle Cigars. You are the CEO, or well, you are the co-founder, correct, of Highclere Castle Gin and Highclere Castle Cigars.
Correct. Yeah, it's good to be with you.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking some time. How is Connecticut today? How is the weather?
It is incredibly gloomy. It's raining sideways. It's like a typical kind of May day. It's a lot like England, actually, in a way. And but tomorrow's quite nice. And where are you located? You're in Vegas, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in Las Vegas, which is funny because we had rain coming down all night last night, like kind of on and off. Nice. So it was like sheets, but which is very uncommon for Vegas in May. But I guess, you know, it's just a weird, strange world that we have.
Well, these are obviously very British brands, and it's a very British thing to begin this by talking about the weather and complaining about it more essentially.
Right? No, absolutely. So for the people that may not be aware of, you know, Highclere Castle Gin and Highclere Castle Cigars, I think that we can probably start with the gin. You know, or if you want to start by just telling everybody kind of your background and how you came to be the co-founder of both these products.
Yeah, sure. It's quite an interesting tale in a way. My family goes back to the 1800s with distilling spirits here in New England, with a very prominent distillery that was my ancestors lost in 1865 because one of them decided to try and ship 800 barrels of whiskey to Canada and then try to avoid paying the federal excise tax on it. And so we were very much in the liquor business, and then we were very much out of the liquor business because the federal government decided it was best we probably don't own a distillery. And then during Prohibition, in fact, where I am, just on the Connecticut River right now, just a few miles north of me, my great grandfather owned a hotel, and when Prohibition hit in 1919, they converted the basement over to what became a pretty infamous speakeasy in the town of Milton, Connecticut. And so that went on for, you know, some time as well. And so liquor kind of is in the veins, I guess you could say. And when I was in my late 20s, I opened one of the first micro distilleries to be opened in Connecticut in many, many decades. And we were producing a moonshine and whiskey, and it did quite well. And I really learned the business through essentially selling whiskey and moonshine out of the trunk of the car. And it was many years later that I realized that all the lessons that we had learned and our commitment to the craft of distilling and kind of brand development and all the things that I feel were going wrong in the liquor business. Like, the fact, you know, it feels to me like 90 or 95% of the brands we see are created in marketing boardrooms, and the stories are artificial and they're made up, and it's all, you know, much of it's bulk produced in the same 3 or 4 distilleries. And I just felt that there was an opportunity there to be a little bit more, I suppose, authentic and more craft-like, but still do something that was quite kind of global and worldly. And that led me to Highclere Castle. And you know, I being of British heritage and having spent so much time there, I really was hoping to do a project, you know, across the pond in the UK. And Highclere, of course, is known to so many millions of people as Downton Abbey, but it's actually a real house and a real fully functioning operating country estate, a farming estate. And so, you know, very fortunately, I got to know Lord and Lady Carnarvon. The Earl and Countess of Carnarvon are the current owners of Highclere and operate it. They operate and oversee the farm, of course, the house. And like so many other people, I was just completely enchanted with it. You know, 5,000 acres of fully functioning farmland and pigs and 2,000 head of sheep and beautiful botanical gardens. And yet inside the castle, you have 400 years of hosting the world's most fascinating, interesting people, royalty, celebrity, statesmen, creative people. And it's always been very much a place where relationships are forged and magic happens. And we know for at least the last, about 150 years, they've been enjoying cigars at Highclere after dinner. It was always tradition gentlemen, and now some of the ladies do too. And for the last 100 years, they've been making gin cocktails. So it felt to me like a very perfectly aligned estate and terroir to give birth to kind of both of these stunning products.
That's a great story. I think that it's really important too when you talk about kind of the the culture of what was going on, right? Because you have royalty that's used to drinking very specific items throughout centuries and centuries, whether it be the top brandy, whether it be the top cognacs, whatever it is, right? And it's like there's an attitude when it comes to luxury and elegance and class. And to speak a little bit about Highclere Castle as a gin, what is because it is a London dry style gin. We do know that just having gin on the label, it has to have juniper. But what botanical sourcing specifically are people going to experience when they try Highclere Castle gin?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I wanted the estate itself to kind of speak for itself in the recipe development. And we borderline lost our mind on the recipe. I mean, it was like a year to a year and a half. In fact, I'll tell you a great story later. Don't forget to remind me of when Lord Carnarvon and I were at the Bellagio in your hometown of Los Angeles.
Okay.
When we tasted and approved the final recipe. So I have to
tell you. Look at that. We were meant to have this talk.
100%. But in terms of the botanicals, when I arrived in Highclere for the first time, and then I spent a year going there frequently, and of course the estate told me what to do. So, for example, right behind the castle itself is what we call the Victorian era orangery. It's built in the late 1800s, the era of Queen Victoria. And in this orangery, even today, grows oranges and limes and lemons. And back in the Victorian time, remember, you couldn't just go to the grocery store and pick up an orange in the middle of January. That was like, you get it in season maybe, but that was quite a kind of a way to show off. It was quite an opulent thing to be able to present someone with an orange after dinner and the off season. And orangeries allowed families to grow citrus all year long. And so this was built then for that purpose. So the very first thing I decided to do was that Highclere should be a very citrus forward gin. Michael, before distilling this product, I did not love gins. I'm like a whiskey, scotch, cognac, rum person. And so the double challenge for me was to design and develop a gin that I truly, actually, unbiasedly love. And so the first thing I did was let's dial that juniper way back and let's bring the citrus of Highclere far forward. And I'm glad I did that. It's probably the most modern part of Highclere Castle gin as a spirit. But behind the orangery is what we call the Walled Monk's Garden. And this is a huge, massive, kind of English landscape garden. But all along the ancient walls are these lush lavender beds. Well, these lavender beds were planted literally in the 9th century by the Bishop of Winchester. The bishops of Winchester lived at Highclere before the Earls of Carnarvon did. Before the king, Lord Carnarvon's ancestor, the estate, it was owned and lived in by the bishops of Winchester. And they were fond of growing herbs and botanicals for medicine and things. So they lined this wall with these beautiful lavender beds. The same beds have been growing for over 1,000 years. So I said, we've got to use this lavender. Let's pick the lavender and let's incorporate lavender into the recipe. So there's just a touch of florality on the gin. It doesn't whack you over the head with the lavender. It's just a slight, subtle, very luxurious, very kind of pretty, subtle nose of florality, like a bouquet of flowers. It hits on the nose. And then the third, of course, we do have juniper. We've got 10 botanicals total. But the other, the last component I'll mention to you is that Highclere is quite famous actually for growing oats for thoroughbred racehorses. Okay. Thoroughbreds. By the way, Lord Carnarvon's father and grandfather were both racing managers to Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
I do remember reading something about that was one of the strongest parts of their friendship. Yeah, was their proximity and their affinity for Horses.
Exactly. And Highclere grows about 2,000 acres of these oats. And by the way, they're sold, they're like prize-winning oats. Like if you're in the thoroughbred horse breeding world,
You want those oats.
Highclere oats are the best. So Lord Carnarvon had this genius idea. Let's incorporate the oats, not in the mash, Bill, not in the actual grain, because the base spirit for Highclere Castle Gin is actually an English wheat. But to incorporate the oats in with the botanicals when we make the actual bag to steep in the stills. And I thought to myself, listen, I've been distilling for 15 years. Like, that's ridiculous. You're not going to do anything. Well, actually, it's so insane. It was genius. And it adds this creamy viscosity, this mouthfeel that you're getting on it now. I'm sure you can almost chew Highclere gin like it's a thick cognac or a really nice thick bourbon. It's cool in that way, as opposed to most gins, which just kind of bite and go away. Like it's almost medicinal, most gins. And
no, I agree.
Slosh around and the flavor kind of lasts for 10 seconds.
There is definitely a high amount of creaminess to this as opposed to typical gins that really don't maintain on the palate.
Exactly.
And something that I talk about a lot too when I'm doing my pairings is, having a lengthy finish, having something that remains and has texture and length. And initially, I feel like the audience was, for the most part, all there, and we just had a couple of stragglers where it was just, kind of like, okay, so what are you talking about? What are you describing with length? And it's like, well, there's a certain amount of length that you get when there's either higher alcohol or certain botanicals or products being utilized in the distillation that allow for that complexity that linger in the finish.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the difference between, like, it reminds me of the creaminess is if you think of cream or milk, right? If you take if you put milk in a glass, you take a sip of it. It lines and coats your mouth for a moment. It lingers. It stays on your tongue. It stays on the roof of your mouth. It's thicker in viscosity. And then you've got water, right? Water just kind of goes right down and goes away. When I think of spirits and their viscosity or the mouthfeel, I kind of think of it as that's like the range for me. And you lie somewhere.
Right.
And Highclere is definitely on the upper side of that, where it's a luxurious kind of staying power that it's got.
No, I definitely agree. It's very tasty. Well, I guess that now that we've discussed the gin at length, we should dive into the cigar as I light this up.
Yes. All right. So
tell me a little bit about how this project came about.
Yeah. So I was at Highclere developing the gin recipe. Yeah, and I'm doing a Toro. I know you're doing a Petit Corona.
Yeah, we have got the Edwardian for all of those that watch on the restream or those that watch or those that tune in. We have got the Edwardian, but mostly for those on the reshare, we'll answer any question for anybody that tunes in. But yeah, on the reshare, the Edwardian, which I believe is a Connecticut blend, yes, and then we also have some really nice tobacco mix from Nick and everybody over at Foundation / Highclere.
Yeah, we've got a Connecticut shade wrapper here. We've got Criollo from Ometepe, Nicaragua, Corojo from Jalapa, and then we took the Criollo and the Corojo and we spliced the kind of DNA together, and we made a new type of seed in here that we call Nicadan. And Nicadan is the fusion of Nick's name, Nick, and my name, Adam, in Spanish.
Okay.
So it is all finished with a Mata Fina binder from Cruz das Almas, Brazil. And so basically the inspiration from this came from when I was walking through the great library at Highclere. Lord Carnarvon was telling me a story. And I asked about a particular chair that was in the library. And, and Lord Carnarvon said, oh, that was Winston's favorite place to sit when he would visit my grandfather. And I said, wow, what a statement to make. Winston Churchill was a visitor. And he would sit there and enjoy his cigars and gin martinis and things. And so I got back from Highclere, back to Connecticut, and Nick is one of my closest friends. We had been talking for some time about doing a cigar project together. My background was not in cigars. I smoked them, but I had never released one or been a part of releasing one. Mm-hmm. It just launched Foundation Cigar and the Way Wednesday. And so I came home. I had the idea in the shower, which is where the best ideas happen.
Always.
Do a Highclere cigar. I know that Highclere's had been smoking cigars. Lord Carnarvon's father, grandfather, great-grandfather. I mean, his great-grandfather discovered King Tut's tomb with Howard Carter in Egypt with a cigar in hand and opened the door. Like the cigar.
The Senator, hence where the Senator comes from.
The Senator, exactly. That was my. That's why we did that. I can't wait to talk to you about that one too. But yeah, exactly.
I've smoked it and reviewed it on the channel.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Did you like it?
I did. I think that there's this beautiful way that Nick has in telling a story through his blends and through his cigars, and I thought that it was great. It was great homage, and it was actually that cigar was what led me to Highclere Castle for the second time. The very first time that I personally had ever heard of Highclere Castle was through Cigar Vixen's channel. Just like everybody, I feel like on YouTube, right? You have influencers that you've come across, because I didn't really, as somebody who just always casually smoked cigars, well, not casually, I guess. I smoked quite a few cigars, but as somebody who just thoroughly enjoyed smoking cigars, I was never the type of person before I had a channel, right, that cared enough about cigars to want to watch somebody else review them. Yeah. I cared more about me smoking them and reviewing them on my own.
Get that.
So cigar influencers was kind of a new thing to me personally. I was like, if I get up there and I talk about cigars and alcohol pairings, who's going to want to listen to me do that? And I was like, all right, well, who's currently in the space that's already doing it? I had known Cigar Viction for decades. There were people on cigar blogs and forums and different circles. I mean, being in Vegas, we get the big smoke every year. We get IPCPA, which is now just, PCA, TPE. We get all the trade shows. We have some great lounges, especially now with what seems to be a nice reduction on taxes, or at least a cap finally coming into play. So we're Vegas. We have a very entertaining side to us that is unparalleled, right? So a lot of people want to come out here, and Cigar Vixen, being in the space for long time, when she released her video and kind of showcased Highclere Castle Gin and the cigar, and she almost kind of paired them. She kind of did a little bit, but it was just more so showing off the capabilities of what's out there, what exists,
Right.
And that Senator was the second, instance where I was like, oh yeah, Highclere Castle. I need to get one of those cigars and actually do it on my channel. So let's start with the foundation line, and then we'll move into it.
Yeah. And well, we could talk about the two releases that we did for the anniversary of the discovery of King Tut's tomb by Lord Carnarvon, because the Senator is one of them, and the Highclere Barrel Aged Gin is the other. So two very special things to kind of commemorate this 100-year centennial anniversary. But anyway, we can get to all that in time. But it's so where were we? What was our train of thought?
Sorry, we were talking about the cigar.
I approached Nick Melillo, Foundation Cigar, of course, great friend, and I said, hey, listen, I think I've got the project for us to collaborate on finally. And I tell him the story. Here's the story of Highclere Castle. I'm developing this gin. How do you feel about doing a cigar together? Like come out to Highclere. I have Lady Carnarvon found some invoices from hosting King Edward. We've had invoices from the cigar suppliers in London, and we just Nick is a great historian as well. He loves history and authenticity, and that's one thing that we share so deeply in common: a fascination and a passion and a love for that. And so, very much on the same page, and we love these kind of things. And so it was an easy one. And I said to him, listen, if you don't blend the cigar, I will not release one. It has to be you. And if you don't want to or don't have the bandwidth, then I'm fine. I'll drop this. I'll leave it be. Well, 6 weeks later, I'm in the jungles of Nicaragua with Lord Carnarvon and Nick, like some scene I always say out of Indiana Jones. And we're seeing these different blends and kind of crafting the kind of direction. And Nick was so amazing, and we spent a lot of time in the fields and in the factories, and it was good for Lord Carnarvon and I, because while I was a cigar aficionado, I had never had the bandwidth or the wherewithal to go as deep, of course, as I do in spirits, because it's not my daily life and it's not my industry, it's not my expertise. But it obviously it is for Nick, who spent his life honing this craft. And so anyway, we were very lucky to do it. We launched the Edwardian first, which was the style of cigar that we're smoking now that was very popular in the Edwardian era in England, so the 1920s. Then we wanted to do I really felt that there was a need to do a more robust, darker cigar, especially for the American market. And so we looked back in time, and these darker, more robust, more intense cigars were popular in England in the Victorian time. So Nick crafted a beautiful Maduro kind of cigar based on kind of the style of cigars from the Victorian era, 1890s London, that kind of thing. And then, of course, as a very fun kind of limited edition treat, we came up with the Signature to honor the 100-year discovery of the tomb of King Tutankhamun by Lord Carnarvon's great-grandfather. Signature, by the way, to develop these products, the limited edition centennial anniversary ones for the gin and the cigar, I enlisted the help of two dear friends who are very famous Egyptian Egyptologists, Colleen and John Darnell. And they really helped us with the packaging, and they helped us with a lot of education. I was always an ancient Egypt buff, but would never call myself even an amateur Egyptologist. So Signature, for example, that name means it's the ancient Egyptian word for incense, which translates actually as that which makes holy, or really more accurately, of the gods, because the Egyptians did not smoke tobacco. They did not have it. So they would sit over a plate of incense and they would light it, and then they would breathe it in, feeling like that this was from the gods and they were making themselves more holy. So Signature felt like the most ancient Egyptian word possible for tobacco or cigar smoking.
Right. It's like uskebet and like water of life is the equivalent for spirits.
Whiskey. Yep. And the evolution of the word whiskey.
Exactly the evolution of the word whiskey. Yep.
Yeah, and every spirit, every culture more or less has its own word for water of life. Eau de vie of the French,
eau de vie,
even Baishu from China. I mean, it's everyone kind of has this magic water that they discovered at some point in their evolution. Yep. And that magic water became.
When we were doing the live stream last month, or it was actually it was for this month, but last week, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, I have no idea. It's been a whirlwind since Cinco de Mayo. I feel like out here in Vegas, trying to handle. I mean, we have EDC going on this weekend. There's a couple of 100,000 people in town. It is just wild. But we had this conversation on the live stream last time with all the fellas. They were talking about mead had come up in conversation. And I was like, well, because they were saying, how old do you think that mead is? And I'm like, guys, I mean, mead could be as old as when we found honey as a human race, like as a human species. Somebody gorges themselves because they're in that hunter-gatherer mode, right, on fruit or honey or something along those lines. And then some of the things, they remain around half-eaten for a couple of days because you're just sleeping. You had to think about what life was like back in the day where, food wasn't guaranteed. And maybe you went weeks without eating, and then you came across like all of these apples. And you ate until your heart's content, and you just slept for a whole entire day and a half. And then you wake up and you try that apple again because it was so delicious and it tastes a little bit better. Why? Because there's your saliva and there's natural yeast everywhere. And now it has a little bit of alcohol to it. And, it makes you feel a different kind of way than it did before.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt at some point they figured out that magic dust that was collecting on the outside of the grape or the apple, or the honey in a, that they just grabbed the honeycomb and threw it in some kind of a woven basket. They realized at some point that there was something magical about that honey. And then, of course, as you advance a bit, and my understanding is they believe that distillation was really invented somewhere in Arabia. But it was the Italian monks that kind of really perfected it into a medicinal, uses and on a larger scale. But yeah.
Sure. No, absolutely. And, gin is at the core of a lot of the classic cocktails, especially because, you know, in America, as Americans, we hold cocktails very near and dear to our hearts because it is truly an American kind of byproduct, because we had the lakes, we had the ice, we had the trains, we had the transportation, and really it was ice and the ability to actually dilute and to add ingredients too that I think kind of opened up the doors for American cocktail culture. And then you also have the speakeasies and the wonderful, you know, parts of the 1910s and 1920s that it grew and grew and grew. But, you know, without prohibition, we don't spread that, right? Because you don't have some of the best bartenders and some of the people that had working and doing the Jerry Thomas, the Savoy Cocktail Lounge, all of those wonderful things, because American bartenders don't leave to go and, you know, if they had the opportunity, go to these fine establishments and then kind of ingrain the cocktail culture into that. And I had the ability to go back to London, or to go out to London in 2019. I was out there as a group with my job, and we were there to actually visit the Bombay Sapphire, the Laverstroke distillery that had just opened up. So I was out there for gin, and one of the stories that I tell on the channel, and I've kind of shown the bottle, but Bombay Sapphire's master distiller was unfortunately sick the week that we were scheduled to come out. We had all the tickets and everything done, and Bacardi had Bombay Sapphire.
No, it was.
Yeah. It was the gin.
I kid.
That's funny. Maybe it was. I have no idea. But yeah, they were unfortunately unable to meet with us. And Portobello Road, which is another gin that was sold by my company out here. I work in distribution for a lot of these great brands. And, you know, they picked up the ball right away, and they were like, hey, you know, day 3, if you'd like, we'd love for you to come down to Portobello Road. We'll show you a little bit of history. We'll show you kind of our distillery, and then we'll let you blend your own gin. And I guess the Tide laws, or the Tide alcohol.
Tide
House. The way that works in comparison to our 3-tiered system that we have out in the States, very different, especially out here in Nevada with franchise states, you know. But it was very cool because of the fact that you can essentially in London distill your own gin for your bar or restaurant and then just buy it straight from the distillery.
Yeah, I mean, they never, I mean, yeah, I mean, the two things you just brought up are heavily driven by prohibition. Prohibition brought this country to its knees in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that? So prohibition was really enacted actually by women's suffrage movement. Yep. And the government at first laughed, and the women had a good case for it, by the way. I mean, obviously they were at the table saying, look, alcohol is causing severe problems for domestic situations, for households and families. This is not good. It's being abused everywhere. And we'd like to have it outlawed and abolished. Mm-hmm. That stems too, in a way, from Americans' kind of puritanical roots as well, and kind of and also our knack for excess, which I think is best expressed where you live in a way. I would say the Las Vegas and New Orleans are probably at the cusp of they're the tip of the spear. Mm-hmm. So the women's suffrage and rights movement brings this to Congress, and Congress laughs at first and says, you know, 80% of our annual budget is coming in from alcohol excise tax. So you're insane. Right. So we're not going to do this. And then they come back and they say, well, how about if we, you know, introduce a national income tax? And so the federal government says, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Let's do it. So the national income tax is born because of prohibition. Alcohol goes away. All of alcohol goes away, except for 3, 4, 5 distilleries that receive this special kind of permit to produce it for medicinal reasons. Mm-hmm. Then, you know, from 1919 to 1933, alcohol is not illegal to consume; it's just illegal to buy. Right, correct. So, and if you had a doctor's note, you could still go and pick it up. Exactly. I actually own some of those doctor's notes, which are quite funny. People, diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and being given, you know, 3 grams of whiskey a day, kind of thing, from the doctor. Amazing. But what happens after 1933 is alcohol is now legal again, Obviously, the income tax doesn't go away. Alcohol is legal with an excise tax. We never shook the income tax again, obviously, as we all know.
Mhm.
And now you can sell alcohol again. Well, you put out of business all the families like mine who were making alcohol all around the country. The U.S. landscape for alcohol production looked a lot more like Europe. Every state had 4 or 5 eau de vie producers, different types of spirits and whiskeys and bourbons. There was thousands of them that were small, boutique, larger, that were making beers and spirits. And you decimated them all and put them out of business. And then when Prohibition ended, all that was left was basically Jack Daniels and Jim Beam, who were making it, essentially kind of metaphorically, that's what was left. And so for the last, 70, 80 years, all we've had was when I opened my first distillery, there was only 50 or 60 distilleries in the country. So for 80, 90 years, no one was distilling. It was the same brands. And that's why if you look at the liquor shelves in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 50s and 60s, and even up until 10, 15 years ago, 90% of those brands are owned by 6 companies in the US. But however, if you just walk around the streets of Italy and France and South America and these other places, there's a distiller here, there's a shop there,
There is certainly something much more to be said about, the fact that Prohibition changed the landscape of alcohol in America.
Ruined
up until, it's gotten a lot better. It has gotten a lot better, but in a lot of ways, to think about where we could have been if you take away what was honestly 10 years, what was honestly a 10-year gap. But the country itself never fully recovered from that standpoint. As far as we now have way more craft distilleries than we've ever had before. Just like when the craft beer movement kind of hit, and we give Sam Adams and Jim Koch a whole, a whole kind of tip of the cap for starting that movement. But now you have craft breweries in every state, just like you have craft distilleries now popping up in every state.
Every town.
Yeah. But it's still underneath the guise of the 3-tiered system. A manufacturer supplier still needs to find a distributor, and then that distributor then gets to sell it to a retailer or to a non-off-premise account.
Which makes it very challenging, because at the end of the day, the distributors become the gatekeepers for what the consumer gets to have access to. And,
right.
That is the opposite of freedom. That actually very quickly gets quite dangerous. And it has been. And that's why, so many wonderful products out there. I can tell you from firsthand, if you're not incredibly well capitalized, you can't break through the noise at all. So there's very much monopoly kind of mentality that happens because of that 3-tier system. Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, because I think it does keep things quite well organized. And, the original idea for the creation of 3-tier was so that the government would have a lot more, I think, overwatch in collecting the excise tax. That's all they care about anyway. But it create this kind of lengthy and complex kind of dynamic that makes it hard for artists or people that are just full of passion to say, I'd like to bring my product to market. Well, you've got to convince tiers and tiers of people. You got to go through the permitting, the state, the federal side. Then you've got to go find the distributor who actually, and the distributors have 8,000 products in their book. It makes it very unwieldy very quickly. And I still think that we've got a very challenged system because of that.
Are you distributed in how many states? Let's start there.
We're in 28 states and 7 countries with Highclere Castle Gin.
Okay. And which distributors are you distributed through on the West Coast?
Well, we're with Southern in California.
Oh. Okay.
And we're with mostly mid-sized distributors throughout the rest of the country. So every state is different. We did not do one deal with one of the big guys to do nationwide.
Right.
We're with Southern on the West Coast. California is, its own country, as you know. It's practically its own market.
It is definitely its own market.
Yeah, so Southern's been good partners for us there, and then we're with predominantly medium-sized distributors for the rest of the country. But pretty much anyone. If you're in one of 45 states, you can order from our website and have it shipped to your door anyway.
Are you distributed in Nevada?
We're not. We've decided to wait Vegas, as you know more than anyone, is a very expensive and difficult market to launch into if you're not with the right people.
Extremely.
And it's very, very expensive because all the big guys, there's just tons of money being thrown at owning those hotels and casinos. And so
Oh yeah.
decided to avoid that altogether and focus on really forging super high quality prestige partners from London to New England to New York to Florida to Texas to Detroit, Michigan, Chicago. So we're always looking for the best of the best of the best, and not so much trying to compete. I mean, we just can't compete with Diageo and those super big guys, so we don't try to.
Well, I think that, just in the comparison from what I'm tasting in the Petite Corona, which has, the combination of the Criollo and Corojo in the Ometepe, and then your, how did you pronounce the special seed that is the hybrid of you and Nick?
Nicadan.
Nicadan?
Yeah. So it's Nick and Adan, which is my name in Spanish.
Nicadan. I love that. That is fantastic. I think that it's one of the things that I've really appreciated about the channel is I've been smoking cigars for 20 years. I have never smoked more Connecticut cigars in my life than in the last 2 years since I started this channel. And I understand that, over the last 5-6 years, every brand has to have a Connecticut essentially to kind of come to market to, if it's like a core line. But also the beauty of having that creamy component, the coffee comparison, and then also when you can add a level of spice to create that texture, the length, the backbone to it. And that's something that I feel as though both the Ometepe and this hybrid seed that you have in here do a great job of. It makes sure that it's not boring. It doesn't, it's not just a Connecticut for a beginner. It's a Connecticut for a passionate cigar smoker. And
you nailed it. I appreciate you saying that. To use the cross, I know your spirits and wines as well, so I'm particularly enjoying this conversation. But I've always said this cigar to me, this is our champagne.
Yep.
This is it's a dry, sophisticated, ornate French champagne with lots of tiny bubbles, and what I mean by that is, it's nutty. It's got those notes of light chocolate or light coffee kind of. It's got that. What I was looking for, and Nick and his genius nailed. I was looking for a scent I call, and you've got this probably in other houses up north in New England. I certainly grew up with it. At Highclere, it's all pervasive. I call it yesterday's fireplace.
Okay.
When you come down to a great room and you had a nice roaring fire in the fireplace all night long, and you get that scent and flavor the next day.
Absolutely.
And in Highclere, aside from the main fireplace in the library, the walls are lined with about 5,000 volumes of antique books dating back to the 15th century. So the room smells of yesterday's fireplace and antique leather books. And this is that smell. It's that aroma, and it's that draw, plus the kind of ornateness of all the other components, which is, that champagne kind of creamy champagne feel. So it was bold of us, I think, to come out and launch with the Connecticut shade, but we did it because it was the authentic thing to do. And it's what we felt compelled to do. We felt it was the right authentic way to tell that story. And we didn't want to just release out of the gate what everyone else was doing. We wanted to be authentic to the Highclere story, which we did. So
I love the pairing too with the gin. My favorite pairing of all time is cigars and champagne. On almost any occasion. I love the Winston Churchill historical essence of it, and I also love the just the way that champagne has this refreshing quality to it that kind of cleanses your palate. It has flavor, the buttery, yeasty components to it. And then, as you described it as well, you get kind of that creaminess, the nuttiness, and depending upon what type of champagne it is, if it's been on the lees or whatever, you can also get demi-sec. You can get something that's a little bit less dry or extra dry even. And my biggest argument for starting the channel was I felt as though in the space of cigar reviews, right, a lot of people were saying, oh, you have to review cigars with a clean palate. You can only drink water when you smoke cigars, or you can only do this, or you can only do that. And it's like, there's a reason why people have been pairing cocktails, spirits, and, all different types of alcoholic beverages for a very long time. Scientifically, even. You can get into all the specifics, but there are certain parts about a cigar that you cannot taste unless you have alcohol to kind of unlock some of those receptors on your palate. And when you have that combination of the two in whatever format you personally enjoy, you're able to experience something with your cigar that is much more so than if you just drank water or if you drank nothing and you allowed your palate to dry out. Because these are very alkaline products on our palate. And having that little bit of sugar, whether it be in the way of chocolate, whether it be in the way of alcohol, it just allows you to open up your flavor receptors and experience a deeper connection with your cigars.
In a word, amen. I mean, I speak about this often, actually. I mean, I am always having an espresso, at the very least a sparkling water, but more likely a spirit or a glass of wine of some kind with my cigar. I find that the dance that they do is glorious. And with Highclere Castle Gin, specifically with this cigar, I found the magnificence of how they play together to be really unique and special. I think of gin, and by the way, you and I are just drinking it straight right down the rock. So
right. Well, I'm just drinking it neat. I'm not even adding ice.
There you go. I mean, it is almost like a sorbet for the cigar. It's palate cleansing. It is allowing the cigar to be refreshed on my retrohale, on the palate. Like as I'm sensing the entirety of the smoke experience, it's bringing it anew and allowing me to explore the different stages of the cigar itself. And then likewise, the cigar itself, the leathery, the nuttiness of it, it brings to life the citrus, and it makes the citrus more vibrant in the gin, the florality of it more vibrant. And I love what you said before too about, having champagne be one of your favorite things with a cigar. I completely agree. Because it's sparkling water with depth, with many floors under it of kind of complexity. So yeah, I couldn't be more in agreement with you, and I really feel strongly that I'm in cigar lounges all around the country all the time, and I say, oh, what's your favorite Scotch, bourbon, Armagnac, cognac to pair with the cigar? And I always say Highclere Castle Gin. They said, oh, a gin? And I say, yes, absolutely. Give it a try. You'll get so much more out of the cigar than you will with a bourbon. Because, by the way, I'm not knocking.
Sorry, I'm just showing the bottle for the audience. We had a comment come in, and they wanted to see the bottle again.
Oh, nice.
So I'll give you the back end too.
Not that I'm knocking a bourbon with a cigar, because by the way, I also do that. But I find that the gin just kind of brings an explosion of flavors out of the cigars, and I don't even mean just Highclere or the Foundation line, but any cigars that I enjoy to smoke. It does do something. So you're quite right, and it's an education process. People don't know that they can't drink, that they can't not drink a brown spirit or a red wine with it. In fact, try champagne, try a gin, try
Riesling. Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, Pinot Grigio.
Like
an Aperol Spritz, absolutely.
Cigar.
Yeah, Aperol Spritz is fantastic. I mean, like the Cuba Libre, even. Just a simple rum and Coke with a lime. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that was really why the channel was always Master Your Ash. It's not Master Your Ash because we're over here trying to get like a flawless ash or a stack of dimes, as I've heard it referred to recently. I don't know. I've been smoking cigars for 20 years. Like the phrases that people use have changed, but it's one of those things where for me, my exposure into the industry. So I was born in New Jersey, raised here. In being raised out here, nobody in my family smoked cigars, directly at least. Maybe it was something they were handed by a friend or something like that at work. And then, my dad would have one as he was having some drinks one night to celebrate something. But, it was not like a commonality that I would see cigars around me. And what ended up happening was I I was out with some friends one night. We were celebrating an evening, and I was about 18 at the time. Somebody handed me a Romeo y Julieta, just the Dominican Republic version of it that they got at the gift shop at the Mirage. And I smoked it, and I had smoked only probably like clove cigarettes, Black and Milds, and Swisher Sweets up to that point. So they gave that to me, and they were like, "This is a cigar. I want you to try it." And I smoked it, and I'm like, what is this? Like, this is so different. It's so smooth. And I look back at that now, and I'm like, a Romeo y Julieta, Dominican tubo, like, very funny. But, you know, like, we all have that entrance into the cigar world. And I remember going, you know what? That was a very pleasurable experience, minus the hangover that I had the following day. Let me go down to a local brick and mortar, because there are cigar shops here, and find out more about this. So I went to a local brick and mortar, and just like with cocktails, just like with spirits, just like with kind of my evolution professionally into going from the bar, being behind the bar, to kind of being in front of it on the distribution level now, and mixology and all of that fun stuff. My evolution into the cigar world at the age of 18 was going to a local brick and mortar in Las Vegas, meeting a tobacconist that really had a passion for the industry, and them going, okay, what have you smoked? Because obviously this is a very daunting task. You're inside this humidor. There's thousands of cigars. What have you smoked so far? And I told him, and he was like, okay, if you enjoyed that and you liked certain parts of that, I'd like you to try Arturo Fuente's short story, and then tell me what you think about that. And I'll just give you a cigar that, you know, either gets in between or goes a little bit higher, a little bit lower body, medium body, higher body. And if you want, you come back in, and I will, you know, I'll gladly walk you through some of these other lines, but I don't want you to have to like look at the menu, so to speak, and become, you know, just completely lost. Just try this one cigar. If you hate it, I'll buy it from you. You know, like I'll comp it. But if you love it, then I'll give you another recommendation. And it was like, I found myself going back there every week, and then eventually like every few days, and trying more and more things. And that was my inception into it. And then, you know, a lot of the people in the lounge, they had lockers. And those lockers had alcohol. And oftentimes I would be treated, because I was just now like, you know, becoming a member, so to speak, of the lounge, or, you know, a person that felt confident enough to have and carry conversations about what I was enjoying with the other patrons, that they, you know, would bring out a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, or your typical, you know, Dewar's White Label, or sometimes it would be Lafroig or Lagavulin or a single malt, Isla Peaty Scotch, whatever it was. And then I remember one specific day, somebody was celebrating. They brought out a box of Monte Cristo A's, Belgian chocolate, and vintage Graham's 1994 port. And the combination of that, just Cuban Monte Cristo A's, Belgian chocolate, and port, blew me away. It was like an experience that I had never had before, and just like all experiences that you've never had before, you're both astonished and kind of questioning life at that point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. And, you know, it's funny that you, as you tell that story, it's like, I think we probably all have these wonderful memories on when we found a love and an appreciation for not just cigars and spirits and wine. So I hope you don't hear this.
That is a train.
It's an antique choo-choo train kind of going by.
There is an actual train. Look at that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I know. It's about memories, isn't it? It's about experience, and that's what these products do for us. They allow us to kind of create these wonderful memories, and from a producer perspective, a supplier perspective, one of the things that I love the most in the whole world is sharing this art that we spend so much time crafting with people that really appreciate it, and then they go off and create their memories, and they have moments. I'll never forget, for example, the lockdown had just started, right?
Sure.
And all of us were like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. This is frightening. Like, what is going on right now? This is crazy. And so we came up with this concept to do something rather weird. We said, you know, we're going to do a live cocktail party, virtual cocktail party, hosted by Lord and Lady Carnarvon at the castle. And we're going to throw it up on our Instagram and our Facebook page. We ended up having the most watched virtual cocktail party in internet history with like 50,000 people tuning in. So, but what I loved about it though is here we are at the castle. There's just some cocktails. Louis, the head butler, is making these cocktails. The rooms are glorious at Highclere, of course. And Lorelina and Kennard were just kind of sharing stories and hanging out. And it's like welcome people from all around the world. And I remember seeing this one. We were like post in the comments, post pictures of what you're doing. So this one family posted a picture, and they were in this little living room, and the dad had put on his tuxedo, and mom had put on this beautiful gown, and in between them sat this little girl who was probably like 9 years old, and she got all dressed up, and she had a little tiara on, and this family, of course, just the mom and dad, had lifted up their Highclere Castle Gin martinis, and they posted the picture, and I thought to myself, my God, in the middle of this creepy COVID lockdown thing, here we are bringing these moments of joy into, they had a bottle of Highclere there, these moments of joy into their living room. They can't go out. There's nowhere to go. It's not like mom and dad are going out to dinner right now. The restaurants are closed. They're there with their daughter, and they all got dressed up for a virtual cocktail party. And I said to myself, you know, my God, if anything, we're giving people wonderful memories through our spirits, through our cigars. And that's the job we have. That's our responsibility ultimately.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. It's one of those where I think that any brand that has a family attached to it, an identity that is like that, you know, you want this to be something that generations build memories off of. I remember during the pandemic, one of the tequilas that was launched kind of coming right out of it at the beginning of 2021, so to speak, or at least when things kind of loosened up. It was a project from somebody who was, he was a regional manager for one of the suppliers that we have in town, big supplier, big brand. I mean, he was part of the Bacardi portfolio for a while. And then he left, he went to the Stoli portfolio. He was a regional manager there as well, kind of covering the West Coast. And he said, you know, I'm going to sell all three of my houses. I am going to partner with Tony Hsieh's people from formerly Zappos, and we have come up with a tequila that we're going to come to market with. And it's going to be in partnership with, or it's going to be, you know, one of those things that I get to create a family legacy on and build off of. And he's like, all I want is, he's like, I don't ever want this tequila to be Patron. I don't ever want it to be Don Julio. What I want it to be is I want it to be something that is identified as like, you know, this family's tequila. And, you know, we have created so many memories, just like the people have for so many generations off of the Don Julio family, the Patron family, the Cuervo family, so on and so forth, you know. And I thought that that was a beautiful way to kind of think, you know, and
100%.
It's just something that, you know, when it comes to going back to the idea of pairing spirits with cigars, I feel like gin, you know, one of the actual first guests that was ever on this particular channel, my show, was Poofy, Matt Booth, with Room 101 Cigars and Gin. And it's funny because, you know, it was through a friend, and he was coming in, I think, for PCA that year. And it was going to be the first show that I had ever been to as far as PCA. I had dropped off cocktails because I had helped pre-batch for some brands and, like, you know, been in the show floor as everybody's setting up. But I had never actually attended the show until that year. And he was like, yeah, you know, I'm in town. Abe Froman from Embargo is, you know, driving. I can drive up and see you. So at my buddy's house that we filmed our studio episodes to kind of kick off the channel, he came in with Abe Froman. And, you know, we just sat there and we chatted for a few minutes. I had showed him some Room 101 Darumas that I had from the 2011 release. So they were about 10 years old. And, you know, just how long I had kind of followed, because I think Tatuaje, Illusione, Room 101, some of those like kind of eclectic and very, very fringe brands that kind of helped initiate that second gold rush after the 90s of cigars and ushered in kind of that punk rock band, bad boy, you know, blending with a very notable veteran kind of style.
Yeah.
When they ushered in that movement, Room 101 was a brand that I truly enjoyed their blends, you know, to the nth degree. And I was sitting there, and I had tried Room 101 gin before. I had tried a lot of his cigars, honestly, but he was like, out of the 3 cigars that you recently sampled, which one do you want to pair with? And I'm like, well, you're the master blender, dude. You master blended the gin, you master blended the cigars. It would be completely wrong of me to take this opportunity and just say that we should pair it with this. You tell me what you want to pair. And he's like, you know what? I think we'll do the Payback Connecticut. You know why? Because I think that it's going to pair the best with any gin cocktail that we throw at it. And I'm like, yeah, it makes kind of sense. A Connecticut Shade cigar. And, we did 5 different gin cocktails that day on camera for that episode. I mean, everything from your, very spirit heavy, sharp and forward Negronis to, the lightest gin and tonic and pink ladies that are out there, just to kind of have a breadth of experiences as we move through them.
Yeah.
And that little Robusto, I mean, that thing went to all of them and spoke to all of them. Yeah. Obviously, his botanical set being much more Asian in style, much like a Suntory Roku with, teas and different types of yuzu citrus and stuff like that. Whereas this is very much more elegant in the terms of lavender and kind of a prolonged texture and finish and length.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately it is still a London dry, and I wanted to stick to the elements we had on the estate, right? If it wasn't really there or didn't make sense to be there, then we weren't going to use it. And so it was kind of like I didn't want to. There's a big trend right now in gins. There's a lot of flavored gins. There's a lot of kind of crazy stuff happening, kind of like what happened with flavored vodkas in the late 2000s and all that stuff. And I just want to keep it true and simple and pure and honest and make it the perfect gin in that way. We're up to 114 international gold awards. Right now, we're the 2nd most awarded gin in the world, after only Beefeater, who's been around a little bit longer than us. And
just a tiny bit.
I think we're going to take the top spot soon, though, because it's real and it's luxurious and it's still crisp and it's fun and it's all those things. So I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I'm glad you're enjoying it with a cigar.
Oh yeah, that is the very best way to enjoy it, in my humble opinion.
100%.
It's also, so 43.5, 87 proof. Was there a specific ideology when it came to the 87 proof? Because I believe that you're kind of like in between, right? With a lot of like Sapphire is right at 47.3 or something in that realm. Yeah. And then you do have gins that kind of tinker with the 42, 41. Some even go down to 40, but right around there.
I just, as you know, but I don't know if everyone who's watching knows,
right.
With every increased proof point, you're adding more alcohol, but the alcohol is the flavor. The balance is always just water. And so it's always no spirit category, no individual spirit should ever have a flat proof point or alcohol or ABV. Like,
I agree. It's a very American thing.
Very American. Like that's insane. The ABV should be what it is to maximize where that spirit needs to live. So in our case, I remember just trying every half a proof point in a range that goes from 80 proof to 90 proof to figure out like what was the mouthfeel, what flavors are coming out now. We use very good water that actually comes up from an ancient spring in England. So water is very, very important. Remember, if you're 80 proof, that's 40% alcohol. The other thing that's in that bottle is water. So you're drinking a lot of water in any liquor you drink.
Right.
So the water's important. So we lock that up fine. But it comes down to what is the most flawless ratio, and where do you get to a point where you're maximizing flavor and minimizing burn? With all that flavor comes the alcohol itself, and the alcohol itself is strong and it can burn. So how do you balance out? And every single brand personality is very different. I encounter brands very frequently that I think have very good essentials, but I actually think they get their ABV wrong by slight amounts, and they can improve it by just a tiniest of tweaks. But it's 80 proof, or they try to round it here, round it there. It's easy for the label, whatever. I don't know, but so we were very thoughtful in that. It just strictly comes down to that's where I felt was the actual maximum opportunity for flavor.
No, I agree 100%. You cannot be pigeonholed to some ideology that like, oh, well, if we put it at 42, it's not going to say 40, and that's not a round number that people are going to identify with. You have to be true to what you're creating. So
Totally.
I think that's a great way of stating that.
Yeah.
There's a barrel aged gin in development. Was kind of what you alluded to. Oh,
no, it's let's see.
It's here. It's already out.
Well, it came out in November. We pre-sold we only released 2,000 cases of it. This is the Highclere Castle barrel aged gin in this gold bottle.
Oh, that symbol looks very familiar.
Yes, exactly. This is the as on the cigar and the signature. This is the pectoral that was found on the necklace of King Tutankhamun. I developed this bottle actually in concert with the Egyptologist I told you about before. On the side here, we have very authentic ancient hieroglyphs. This spells out Tahutkat Hejet, which is the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic translation of Highclere Castle. Tahutkat Hejet means the great domain or estate, which they didn't have a word for castle, so close as you get. She who is high, she who is bright or clear. So Highclere Castle. And then we grabbed two tombed, what's the word? It escapes me now, but two elements out from within the tomb. This one is the king, the pharaoh, Tutankhamun, giving his wife a drink of wine, and in this one, she's giving him a drink of beer, which came off of this. So we made 2,000 cases of this. It's all sold out except for, I think we've got about 100 cases left, and it's only available on our website. You can't buy this in any liquor stores. We didn't go to distribution on this when we went direct. We'll never make it again. And I'm very proud of it. I barrel aged this to make the contents of it. I was able to secure my dear friend and a partner of ours, Raj Bhakta, the founder of Whistlepig.
Oh, yeah. Bhakta.
I was able to buy from him 50-year-old Armagnac casks from his new chateau in France.
Mm-hmm.
I sourced Scotch whiskey barrels that were spent and unused American oak barrels to be used for bourbon. And I filled them all with Highclere Castle gin for 2 years and let them rest. Then I blended them together, and it resulted in this like incredible honey golden colored, like imagine, I call it toasted citrus brulee. That's what it tastes like.
Oh, yeah.
Little bit of notes of leather, notes of some toasted kind of toasted almonds almost, definitely toasted orange peel. And it's just glorious to sip. So I'll send you a bottle of this.
You're too kind.
It's gone. But people can get it on our website at highclerecastlegin.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So one of my buddies that I went to high school with actually invested when Raj crowdfunded the Bhakta line.
Yeah.
So currently, and what I featured on the channel when he gifted them to me was, I think that it's barrel 23, 24, and 25 was the little 3-pack of Bhakta. And that was during everything that was going on in 2021. I kind of came back into the industry with my same distributorship that I had previously been working for, which is Southern out here in Las Vegas.
Okay.
So I returned in 2021, like in April. I think that I had received the samples from my good buddy that I went to high school with in January, filmed the episode, and then I remember the Universal Whiskey Experience was getting ready to start, like kind of a month or two into my return, because they didn't know how big the show was going to be. It's pretty much the most opulent show at the Wynn every single year when it comes to whiskeys. And Raj had sent his people to do a Bhakta booth. And upon seeing everybody, I was like, hey, I just had this for the very first time. I'm so excited about, what essentially an Armagnac that's been blended to create what we now, interpret as just a brandy, but traditionally an Armagnac blend, right? And then finished in Scotch casks.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so unique and so interesting that, Raj has this vision for how he does spirits. And I'm sure that you agree. He's very passionate about it the same way that Nick is about cigars, the same way that we are about spirits and cigars, right?
Exactly.
So when I tried it there at the booth, and then fast forward to, a year or two later, it was, sorry, 2022, not 2021, but fast forward to a year later, we just had the Universal Whiskey Experience again this past month here. And about maybe a month before that, we celebrated the launch of Bacta. So that's something that my distributorship actually sells here in town now. And I believe that we received our first order this month or at the beginning of June. So super excited about that. That's fantastic. There's a collaboration between your gin, and you can point specifically to the barrels, where you source them from, and how you use them. Because that's something that also to a lot of bigger brands don't always want to say, like, hey, we contacted Brown-Forman and they sent us Jim Beam barrels, and that's what we age our gin or tequila in, right?
Exactly. The provenance is crucial to me. I think it's important to the consumer. I think it's important to the story. Where does your stuff actually come from?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest points of the story. Do you personally source the botanicals, or do you have somebody that you work with for botanical sourcing on the gin?
Yeah, we work with someone. So we actually take as much as we can from the estate, but there are components that we can't pull from the estate. For example, juniper. Juniper grows wild on the hills around Highclere, but it's all protected species. And so the local government will not allow us to start ripping it out of the ground, understandably so.
Makes sense.
We have our team that works on sourcing it from the south of England and where we need to get it from. So there's a process in place for it. I wish we could be 100% estate grown. We're as much estate grown as we possibly can be.
Are you 100% England grown?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then
that's awesome.
It's all sent to Langley, which is the oldest. Our distillery partner is the oldest gin distillery in England. In fact, they house the oldest copper pot gin stills in England, which go back to like the mid 1850s, something like that, mid 1800s. The still that we use is called Jenny, and it's quite a beautiful still, actually. And so yeah, we do it all out of Jenny, and good to go. Jenny makes our gin.
one still for the operation. Awesome.
Yeah, we do.
And about
we do large batches, of course. I mean, we're going to do probably between 25 and 35,000 cases this year, so we do have some decent volumes, and it'll be just. But it is one still that does it, and we just do large batches and then go from there.
How many different botanicals?
10.
10. And is it vapor, or is it kind of more of a percolated?
So what we do is we essentially create this magical, massive tea bag, and then we bring the spirit up to temperature overnight, which is an English wheat base. We submerge it in like a tea, where it evaporates and takes like a cloth, like a cheesecloth kind of style, and then it takes with it, the vapors take the oils with it, where it's then brought out. We do that 3 times. We make our cuts exactly how we kind of want it to be, and then we blend it to proof and off to the races.
That's fantastic. I think that's another specific distinction to where people what method they use to actually infuse botanicals. I mean, we don't really see very many compounded gins on the market anymore, but just a clear distinction between how much actually goes into it, because there's a certain arrangement that you have to have the botanicals in so that one doesn't burn quicker than another and create off flavors in the actual spirit. And I'm pretty sure that those oats as well probably help as a protector, as well as adding cream, because of the fact that they probably have a much higher burn point to them than some of the more delicate herbs and spices that might be in there.
Definitely the case. Yeah, I think it's the whole thing came about quite easily in that way. I mean, it was about 25 recipe iterations to get it right, and like I mentioned, it took us about a year to a year and a half to do it. But I never mind that. I mean, this project was spare no expense. Get it perfect. Just make it absolutely perfect. And I think we did. I think we pulled it off.
What is at Highclere Castle? What is the go-to cigar for everybody there, out of the Highclere line?
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, so the Brits really do love Connecticut shade.
Of course. And
the kind of British kind of flavor profile dynamic is quite different from here. Everything in America is bigger, bolder, stronger, more intense, right? And UK, it's kind of the opposite. So I would say definitely the Edwardian of the size that you're smoking right now, because the Brits also tend to prefer smaller cigar gauges.
Oh
And
yeah.
Americans, the bigger, the longer, the huger, But when Americans come over for like shooting weekends and things, they do love to jump onto the Victorians and our darker cigars. And if you've got a Victorian in a Churchill style, the American is happy,
No, oftentimes, I mean, I remember I was out visiting Hennessy in 2019 as well. And when we were there, we were treated to one of the like historic cottages in Paris and different things like that. And it seemed like every single place that we went, they had a fine selection of Cuban cigars to end the evening with a nightcap of cognac.
Yeah.
And that became one of my favorite pairings as well. I absolutely love cognac and gin, which coincidentally enough are like the two main spirits when it comes to cocktail culture and the origins thereof, right? Like you can pretty much bet that 90% of the cocktails that were being made in the late 1800s, early 1900s were made with those two bases, just because of the botanical set, the aromatics that both bring to the table, and the complexity in both. There's a reason for it, and I always preach that. But to have that experience in Paris where, you have a selection of fine Cuban cigars and cognac at the end of the evenings, it was very interesting because of the fact that none of those cigars, just like going back to 20 years ago when I started smoking cigars, you didn't have 60 ring gauge cigars, much less 70, 80, 90. No knock on Asylum for doing what they do, because they're very fun and playful in their branding. But, any cigar brand that has 70, 80 ring gauge cigars, I mean, it's a very American thing.
Yeah.
To really be smoking stuff over like a 50, 52 ring gauge. I mean, even some of the Toros were never really seen 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea behind the cigar, even at Highclere, to be honest with you, is, you've just had a big meal, light up, you want to light up a half an hour or 45-minute cigar, and you want to move on with the evening, which is card games, or it's some other, or maybe it's flirting, or whatever the next step.
Right.
It's not let's commit to a 2-hour sit and smoke, and that's kind of the difference, is that where does the cigar fit in time and place with society today? Today, cigar culture is one of cigar lounges where I'm escaping home to watch a 3-hour football game and have dinner, wings, cocktails, beers, whatever. And I've escaped my long day. My wife let me out of the house or whatever. And I'm going to sit in the dark here and kind of smoke for hours. So build them a big one. But I think the idea previously was, like at Highclere, what we'll do, we can't smoke inside anymore because of the rules against the priceless paintings and things like that. But we'll go out on the terrace. There's off the library, this beautiful kind of French terrace that we go out after dinner, and whoever wants to come can come, and then we'll enjoy cigars for half an hour, 45 minutes, often with the cognac, which is, to be honest with you, I totally agree. My favorite, alongside the gin, cognac would be my go-to spirit. So that we do that for a while. Then we go, in England, it's often raining too. So go back inside and move on with the whatever next is on the agenda.
What is your preferred cognac of choice? Would be my next question.
It's always impossible for me to answer that question about any spirit, because I'm so mood oriented when it comes to spirit and wine. And like the desert island question is always just so impossible for me. I would say,
you don't have to single out one, but just a couple that you personally like.
I mean, if I really had to pick just a go-to, readily available, wherever I am in the world, I would go with Remy Martin. It would probably be my kind of go-to, kind of favorite house, kind of safe bet wherever I am. When you get into the boutique stuff, I tend to then move over to the Armagnac side of things, because I like the nuanced kind of uniqueness that Armagnacs bring to the table. I think there's more earthiness in many of them. I think there's even a bit of whimsy or weirdness in some of them, elements of apricot and pear and things that you don't get from all the cognacs, which I think can be quite fun. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's also a rustic quality of it, where it feels as though, and maybe it's because of the lack of a secondary distillation.
Yeah.
or being distilled to proof the way that they normally are, I believe, as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That with an Armagnac, you kind of experience this industrial rustic, not in the way of a cachaça or a rum, but like a funky Jamaican rum, but you get certain fruity esters and elements in it that you don't necessarily find in a cognac because of the overblending, the adding of sugar sometimes, and different coloring agents that are allowed by law. And, we know that most of the brands are doing them.
Yeah.
It's not that it's too far removed from the terroir, because like you just said and alluded to, like with Remy Martin, which is Premier Cru, it is a mixture of Grand and Petit Champagne only, pretty much, right? Like you're getting out of the 5 different growing regions, you're getting a very specific set that's been blended a certain way, right? So they have a very specific way of doing it. And there's a very specific flavor with Remy Martin, which I truly appreciate. And once again, we've gone into Remy XO. We one of the Louis ambassadors for the entire Western region is a good friend of mine and is often hosting events at 8 Lounge and educating people on Remy specifically, but Louis as as an elegant expression of what cognac can be. So it's very nice to hear. I think that, cognac, there's a lot of difference in, whether you're at Park or you're at, one of the brands that's using Borderie, or it's using Finois or Bonbois or some of the other things. And you kind of get, I feel with certain blends, some of those more rustic qualities. But at that point, you might as well try an Armagnac, because at least they're made that way. It's not just a growing region that you're trying to pick out of the pile like a stack of hay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, going back to Bacta for a moment, like Raj purchased 300-400 years of Armagnac that he's been dumping, and I've had the pleasure to sit with him on multiple occasions when it was in concept and development mode and taste some of these cognacs. So one night Raj and I think we finished like a 200-year-old bottle of Armagnac that had just been pulled. I don't remember the rest of the night, but I know we had a great time. But those Armagnacs, I mean, this is the farmer's way of making it. They had a craft, they had an art, they have a skill, and they were doing what they intended to do. And when I taste modern Armagnacs, I'll tell you, they don't taste very different. I had cognac probably 100 years ago. Tasted a lot more like the Armagnacs do today. And so I just maybe feel like I'm connecting more with the terroir of France and what the mission was. And it's not supposed to be like, hey, this is so smooth you can mix it, full stop. This is supposed to be like, taste the smoke, taste the hay, taste the earth, taste the terroir. This is what we're doing with leftover grapes. We're going to turn it from that to this, and we're going to mellow it out in these barrels. Like, that's it. That's what it's supposed to be. There was more sugar left, so we didn't want it to waste. So let's make it and finesse that as Frenchly as we can.
No, I agree 100%. So what is your go-to cocktail then, as far as with Highclere Castle Gin?
Yeah, well, that's another tough one. But I do truly mostly drink it on the rocks with an orange wedge. I love it with a splash of fresh squeezed grapefruit juice. That said, the classic martini, very dry, super good vermouth. It's got to be an exceptional vermouth, and either, depending on the mood, a little lemon or orange twist, or exactly one olive hits the spot. I mean, but again, we're in the world of gin now, so we get to I could be in a Negroni mood, and that just makes the night happen. I can tell you, for me, it is not a gin and tonic, but it's a lot of other things.
It's funny because one of the brands that's very popular now is Empress 1908, which has a historical sense up in Victoria, BC, and they use butterfly pea flower in order to create the purple color, the indigo color that gin has. And I was able to watch that gin's complete and total inception and growth from start to finish. I remember that the owner, Daniel Pettit, he had Azure as a brand before that. And I remember helping him out with cocktails. I remember us as a company kind of doing the sales for it. And then it seemed as though everything immediately got scrapped, and they had bought, the distillery right in Victoria, BC, where they often traveled and vacationed in and stuff like that, and created that gin in homage to the hotel and to, the tea service that was done at the hotel. Had a great story as well.
Yeah.
One of the beauties of that gin was the grapefruit in it, like you said, a splash of grapefruit, to the point where their whole entire opening, and I don't think that it ever really caught, even though the gin did as far as popularity goes, but the suggested serve by the brand was a gin and tonic with a grapefruit twist in it, because they love the experience, and I do too. I love grapefruit in cocktails of any kind for the most part, but with gin, it is phenomenal.
Totally agree. Grapefruit is I'll tell you, when I rediscovered grapefruit, it was the weirdest moment. I was in Nicaragua, actually, and I was at a friend's house, my priest, actually. I was at his mother's house, and we decided to do mass in the backyard. Okay. So we're doing mass in the backyard. I'm in the hills above Managua, and my friend's mother had the staff arrange a nice little kind of breakfast juice thing after we were done with mass. And I grabbed the pitcher of grapefruit juice instead of orange juice, and I poured it into a little glass. And I tasted it. I said, "What is this? This is like a magical fruit." They said, "Oh, it's grapefruit juice." I said, "I don't like grapefruit juice. This is not grapefruit juice. No, it's fresh squeezed grapefruit juice." I had a whole new appreciation for it. I said, "This needs to be going into our cocktails," and I've been mixing it, fresh squeezed ever since. The difference with grapefruit fresh squeezed and orange fresh squeezed is pretty significant.
I agree.
What it does to cocktails. And so it's a favorite. It is my favorite juice probably now for making cocktails. Yeah. Just a splash.
It's funny because historically, like a lot of the cocktails that I feel as though are classics, quote unquote, that utilize fresh orange juice are always the hardest to balance, and always the ones that I feel as though really needed to be reimagined, right? Like the Blood and Sand, I think, is a terrible cocktail. Just if you look at the historical text of it, I'm just like, man, we really need to not be so resting on our laurels when it comes to some of these recipes, and just say like, there's a better way to make this drink. I think the Jungle Bird is another one that really suffers, but that's getting into like all those deep dive rabbit holes. But you go to something like La Floridita. And if you go to Cuba and you go to La Floridita, where 90% of the drinks are going to come out of a blender, but that is the historic birthplace of cocktails in Cuba. One of the historic birthplaces of the daiquiri, and like the Hemingway daiquiri specifically, they still have his statue at the bar, and like the Hemingway daiquiri with Luxardo Maraschino, because he didn't want to have sugar, thought somehow, some way that would help his diabetes, to add in more liqueur, and then a splash of grapefruit. Like it's a beautiful expression of a daiquiri, and I just think that you have more versatility in grapefruit cocktails than you ever do with orange.
Totally agree. Sure. Yeah.
It's funny, but once again, going back to Prohibition bastardizing a lot of the things in America, cocktails were another thing that kind of suffered. We lost a lot of talent during the years following, and then everything was kind of underground too. So you had a great cocktail movement in the 50s and 60s, and then America did probably the worst thing that they could have possibly done, and they kind of industrialized it a lot. And you had a lot of cheap ingredients being used in the 70s and 80s, and that really hurt cocktails for a very long time in the States.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it did. Absolutely.
And not even just like we had great spirits, like the evolution of Absolute Vodka, or some of these spirits of the 80s that kind of took over Smirnoff and took over other brands. But I mean, you still had great spirits. You just had terrible mixers and terrible cheap, like non-fresh juices, something that's industrial and comes off of a gun because it was faster to pour a drink that way, or so they thought, and
you had a lot of bad spirits. I mean, you had people fermenting off of pure white sugar and bathtub gins and backwoods vodkas and all that. I think that's what really pushed the innovation, is because these guys were like, nobody was adding orange juice and grapefruit juice to stuff before that period. But
right,
with sour and sweet, you can hide anything. And they had all that stuff there. So that really is like that really gave birth to the, even the word cocktail, right? Like there's a few theories around where that came from, but cock being the kind of what we now call the bunghole on the side of the barrel, right? They would take whatever was left over from stuff, and they would pour it in the cock of the actual barrel for a discounted rate, and the tailings were the leftover bits that no one wanted to drink. So they would pre-batch things back then, and they had different spirits on the bar. They were probably not even all labeled all the way. They were half drunk this and half drunk that. They would just make what we call nowadays a jungle juice. They'd throw it in a barrel for the next day. So it was cocktailings. And that's where they believe the word came from. And you can't imagine drinking that stuff today. But I mean, there were sure enough, there were people at the bar that said, wow, I can make magnificence happen with brandy and gins. And there was no real vodka at the time, but whiskeys for sure, and things like that, and rums.
Are you aware of the this will be the last deep dive that I have, because the cigar is done and I don't want to hold you up for too long, but this will be the last deep dive that we can kind of nerd out for all the enthusiasts that'll watch this on the backside of it. Are you familiar with the Hartford, Connecticut, because you're based out of Connecticut, the significance of Hartford, Connecticut in the way of canned and aged cocktails?
Well, I can't say I'm familiar with it from that perspective, but I'm imagining you're going down the road of Smirnoff and Hubline in the 1950s and stuff, but I'm not sure where that is going with canned and aged cocktails.
So
Smirnoff and Hubline up and down.
No. You nailed it with Hubline. Hubline was founded by Andrew Hubline in 1862, and it was not until kind of his sons and later generations took over. They were doing wedding parties, wedding events, and kind of catering events, right, in Hartford. And there was an event that had come down in the early 1900s that kind of rained out everything for weeks and weeks. There was constant rain basically every single day. And they had pre-batched all of these cocktails that they were going to serve at the party. So they decided that they had to find a way to stabilize them in some way, shape, or form. And that's where kind of the evolution of the canned cocktail comes into play. Was off of Hubline's catering company. Very cool. And they were the first ones to come to market with canned cocktails, one of which being in collaboration with Smirnoff, where it was the Harpoon. And it is said that that is also part of the origin story, because it was essentially vodka and cranberry mixed with citric acid, the origin story of the Cosmopolitan originally.
Right. Interesting.
That is a Hartford, Connecticut thing.
Hubline in Hartford brought this country vodka.
Yeah.
I mean, they got the recipe from Smirnoff, a Russian refugee. There's pictures out there of them marketing it in Connecticut as a test market on billboards, calling it white whiskey. Yeah. Nobody knew what the heck vodka was. And really, really cool stories I've heard firsthand from some of the old timer Hubline guys around what it was like to launch vodka for the first time in this country. Now, of course, it's still the market leader, but funny stuff.
Tequila's catching up in certain states. Like I know in Vegas, it's kind of overtaken vodka for the first time ever, and that's a unique area that I think that we're in. It is very crazy though to think like back then when they were like, hey, if you just drink vodka, nobody will smell it on your breath. Nobody will know. Like the marketing behind it. You can have 3-4 martinis and nobody will be able to pick up the scent. This guy stumbling back into the office, falling over his desk. It's a wild world, the evolution of the U.S. like that. It's crazy when it comes to alcohol. But I really appreciate the time, Adam. Thank you so much for going down the rabbit holes with me and sharing a cigar and some great stories and speaking about, the gin, the cigar line, everything that, you've co-founded. And one of the things that I really appreciate is bringing on friends and bringing friends up with you, and the people that, like you said with Nick, you were like, I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how much money we have to invest into it. I want you to do it because I know that you're the best to do it, and like I think there's something very endearing and benevolent about bringing along your friends and the people that you trust most in order to help create the things that you want to see in the world that carry on the legacy and the names and build those memories, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're spot on, and that's very kind of you to say. I think we've got a wonderful team. I built a fantastic team at Highclere Castle Gin, and of course, Lord Lane and Carnarvon have been the most wonderful partners on this journey. And it's allowed me to express myself and vision and ideas in the form of one of the most award-winning spirits in the world, and
Mhm.
and a fantastic, amazing cigar as well with Foundation and Nick Melillo. So I'm very proud of the work that we're doing, and certainly appreciate people like yourself who understand the industry in some respects more than most because you work in it. The
Yeah.
amount of hard work it takes to kind of activate the brand and educate people and all that stuff. So it was a pleasure coming on your show and meeting you and having some nerdy conversations about this stuff, and do it again at some point.
Absolutely. Well, just let's round out the comments real quick, just so that we make sure that we don't miss anything before you go. Let's see here. We talked about how we both drink our gins. Pan, our good buddy from the Republic of Cyprus, he wanted to know if the cigars are going to be available in the Republic of Cyprus anytime soon.
Well, we're launching right now in London and in Germany. I know of no plans in Cyprus in the immediate future, but there might be opportunities for you to purchase them through our EU network once it's on live in Germany. So I'd recommend you keep a close eye on German retailers who are fulfilling to other countries, because that's probably going to be the fastest way to get that done.
Perfect. Excellent. Oh, and then some our resident engineer, Mr. D Love, he was saying that he was having some Boss Armagnac de Lord Napoleon as of late, and that it was very tasty.
Oh yeah, sure is. Some of the best in the world, and the history
Boss
is
Armagnac.
incredible. Yeah.
Adam, where can all the folks find you, or at least find Highclere Castle?
Yeah, it's highclarecastlegin.com on all social media that way, on our website direct that way. We've got cocktails, and you can buy a bottle if you want to. And there's some of the barrel aged left as well, only about 100 cases of 2,000 left. And then, of course, for the Highclere cigar, Google the same. And there's retailers all around the world and around our country that are shipping them direct. So very easy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking some time once again, brother. It was an absolute pleasure to sit down with you and geek out for a little bit.
Vice versa, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on.
All righty. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.